Tony, I've got a question for you.
Yes.
Asset sale, like deciding whether to sell a business. I mean, if a business doesn't have SDE, is it automatically, I don't want to say automatically default to an asset sale, but I keep running into this when I'm speaking to people who own small food businesses because they keep sloppy books.
Yeah.
They don't want to disclose, for obvious reasons. They don't want to fully disclose what they're actually pulling out of the business.
Mhm.
And at some point, if I'm talking to, let's say, a deli out here that's been around for a while, but that doesn't have good books and is not willing to share the financials, but has, a good location, a long-standing business, and has a bunch of FF&E, should I just do would that just be considered an asset sale because there isn't any SDE and I can't provide financials?
Yeah, there's actually two types of most businesses are sold using an asset purchase agreement. So that's a sale of the business assets, but you're selling the business assets as a going concern. So there's that type of asset sale, which is your standard business sale, versus assets in place, or, only assets, and the type of asset sale I think you're talking about, where basically, there's not a lot of value, intangible value. So you're really limited to just the value of the FF&E and, whatever the lease is. And the lease, most leases don't have a lot of value, to be honest with you, because even if somebody has an under market lease where you would think, okay, great, they've got another 5 years or another 6 years on this lease and it's under market, and that's great. That's going to save somebody a lot of money. Problem is, almost every lease says it cannot be assigned without landlord's consent. And when you go to the landlord will say, yeah, I'll assign the lease with an amendment that brings the rent up to market. So, so the lease, anytime somebody tells me, oh, I have a great lease, it's so much value, it's going to add a lot of value to my, to the price of the business, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's a nice theory. It's just not the reality of what actually happens, because the landlords don't allow that. They'll say, yeah, we'll assign the lease, but only with an amendment, and the amendment brings it up to market.
Great point, because you're representing this. Well, you're going to represent both sides, let's say, in this instance. But that's a great point, because the business owner is going to say exactly what you said. Yeah, it's a great lease. The landlord's a great guy. He told me if I've ever sold that, he'd be more than happy, to carry on the lease with the new tenant, blah, blah, blah. But I guess there's the lesson learned, right? When you're before you're getting into the negotiation stage, to speak at some point early on to the landlord to make sure that what's in store for the buyer. Are they going to be able to, is the lease going to be assigned? Are there any clauses in terms of they won't allow, if it's a sandwich shop and I want to put in a coffee shop, is there going to be a clause in the lease that says I can't have a coffee shop in there because it's a coffee shop also in the strip mall? So, see, that's like, it's a really valuable lesson. They don't teach you that in business broker school, right? But you gotta probe the landlord too. And that's what I'm learning as well, is probe when somebody tells you that, take it as face value, but probe the landlord to trust and verify type of thing, right?
Yeah, but I tend not to get landlords involved in anything. The things you're talking about, get a copy of the lease and look at it yourself. Because if there are restrictions as to what type of business can be conducted, it's going to state so in the lease. So, and the assignment, it's going to state what's required for an assignment. A lot of times there's an assignment fee. I was just reviewing a contract yesterday for a client, and there was nothing in there about an assignment fee and who would pay it. And I know that almost always, there is, if you look at the lease, there's almost always going to say, okay, any request for an assignment must be accompanied by $1,000 or whatever it is. And so, who's going to pay that? So that's negotiable. Buyer and seller can split it. A lot of times a seller pays a lease assignment fee and a buyer will pay a new lease fee if there is one. So, that's all negotiable, but it needs to be stated so in order to avoid arguments. So in terms of conversation with the seller, you just try and get a copy of the lease. When you get a little further down, get a copy of the lease, take a look at it so you know what restrictions are what the lease assignment fee is. You can have the conversation with the seller, all of that.
Would you recommend getting, because my thought process is from now on, I'm going to ask for a copy of the lease when I'm asking for the financials.
I don't care about the lease until I've done a business price analysis and I understand what I can sell the business for, or what I think I can sell the business for. And I know that the seller's on the same page. So if the seller's on the same page and we're going to move forward with a representation agreement, you know, once I have the agreements signed, then yeah, then I'm going to ask for a copy of the lease.
Okay.
But I tend not to do that up front just because early on, I don't even know if I'm going to be working with them. I don't even know if I want to work with them. So I don't want to review their lease until I figure out if I want to work with them at all, because that's
Gotcha.
just extra work, right?
Makes sense.